Hello and welcome back, Dawn here. So today we have a fun process video. A lot of you have commented that you like the videos where I leave in a lot of the process, so I'm gonna include a lot of that today. We're gonna be using the Better Press Autumn Leaves plates here. Now this is a gorgeous set. You get the plates and the coordinating dies as well. This card almost didn't happen. I had a very different plan going in. I had a little disaster along the way and decided to switch it up, change course. So I pulled out the Autumn Thanks frame here, and we're going to hot foil this sentiment. This has this gorgeous little notched corner frame in the plate, and Spellbinders also has these concentric notched corner dies that complement the set. Now, the frame itself gave me an idea, so I pulled out the Autumn Wonder die set here. This is part of the Envelope of Wonder die bundle. You can buy these separate, or you can buy the bundle, which includes all 4 of these dies. So the mother set has this envelope in it, as well as all of these florals. Great value. These florals can be used as backgrounds, focal points, accents, just a great value. They also released these supporting dies, so you can get the Christmas Wonder, the Halloween Wonder, and the Autumn Wonder, and you can interchange these inside that base envelope or use them separately like we're going to do today. And because we're using Better Press, I am going to use the cotton card panels in porcelain. These are 100% cotton and leave a beautiful impression. I'm arranging the plates on my chase here to cover an A2 background. You can see there the markings on my chase. I have an A7 and an A2. I'm allowing the leaves to break outside of that A2 box because I want it to look like it's cut from a larger pattern. I'm arranging them right now so that I only have 4. I know I'm going to have to duplicate a couple of leaves. So I'm arranging 3 of them on the plate, and then I'm leaving a gap to fit in this maple leaf over on the left side there. And then I'm going to take this leaf here and I'm going to fit it into the open area on the bottom. So I'm just making sure that I'm leaving enough space to fit in those 2 leaves when I go to do a second pass. So here you can see I'm just making an adjustment. Now, like I mentioned, I almost threw this away. This card almost didn't happen. Going into it, I planned on doing Better Press 3 ways. And when I went to clean my plates, my cleaner shot across my table and landed right on my Better Pressed panel that I had already done. And the cleaner started dissolving the ink. And then in an attempt to save it, I came up with this idea. So here we go. I'm going to be using the new Better Press Desert Sunset Ink Pack. This has Coastal, Tuscan, Clay, and Apricot in it. I absolutely adore these colors. They are vibrant, but still a little on the muted side, which you guys know is right up my alley. I'm just using that pivot and pounce method to ink these up. This is a slightly thicker ink than the Ranger Archival inks made by Ranger, but they're formulated to adhere to the plate beautifully so you get no beading and there won't be any missed spots when you go to press this into your paper. So we'll run this through our Platinum 6 and that pressure will transfer not only a physical impression, but the actual inked impression as well. So we're going to take a look at this and you'll be able to see just how beautiful that is. Look at all of that detail. The colors are gorgeous and you get that debossed effect from the letterpress. Absolutely beautiful. So now we need to fill in those 2 blank spots. I'm going to move the 2 leaves into the open areas that I left on my chase. So I'm going to take this maple, I'm going to move it over here. Now, I did notice one thing. I didn't realize that that stem was hanging off the chase. So I'm just going to kind of rotate the leaf a little bit. If it's hanging off just a bit, it's okay. It'll still go through your Platinum 6, but if you've got it sticking out there too far, it's going to spin your die as you run it through, and it's going to mess up your impression. So I'll move these into place. I'll remove the dies that I don't need, and I will re-ink my my leaves and then run that through again, and then we will have a full pattern. So again, This was my original plan. I was going to pop a sentiment on it and be done. It's gorgeous. But since I had spilled cleaner all over it, and the impression was still there, but the ink was kind of moving and disappearing thanks to the cleaner. That's what it does. It cleans off the ink. And I didn't capture that on camera, but again, it's what led to the development of these two cards. So what did I decide to do? You guessed it, some messy watercolor backgrounds. Okay, so I will have a card at the end that I'll show you. The second card, I actually used the original panel that I messed up on. This one, however, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you how to do this messy watercolor in a little more controlled fashion. First thing I needed to do was match the colors that we had. So I'm using a little bit of cobalt blue with some of that lighter blue here. This is my Mungyo 48 half pan palette. And for the apricot, I'm taking a little bit of magenta and mixing it with a little Jaune Brilliant and a little bit of Naples yellow. This is going to give me that beautiful apricot color. For the clay, I'm going to use a little, I think this is burnt sienna. No, it's a red brown. I think that's what it's called in this palette, red brown, and a little bit of burnt sienna. That's going to give me a really good match for that clay color. And then for the Tuscan, I'm going to end up using a little bit of, I believe it's yellow orange in this palette, and then I'll add just a touch of burnt umber to that. So the yellow orange is quite bright, and then just to knock that back a little bit, I'll take a little bit of the, I believe it's burnt umber, and that will just knock the intensity, the vibrancy of that yellow back just a bit. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I am going to create a washed out background. So in traditional watercolor, there is a technique, it's called lost and found edges. Now here what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with some areas a little more detailed, and then I'm going to allow those areas to wash out or fade away. The technique in watercolor, traditional watercolor, you will see artists, they'll have a lot of detail in an area, and then they will just let an area fade away, the lost edge. Here I won't be able to lose the edges because our ink is waterproof, so it's going to stay there, but I'm still using that same mindset. So I'm adding a little bit of controlled watercolor within the leaf itself, but then I'm pulling that color beyond the edges of the leaf and letting the water carry it for a very fluid look. And then of course I'm going to add a couple little splatters, because what is a loose watercolor without some splatters? It's not done. That's what it is. You got to add some splatters. So I'm going to continue to do the same thing here for all of the leaves. Again, we'll kind of do some controlled watercolor within the leaf itself, and then add some water outside of the leaf and let that color just continue into the background. Let it flow, let the pigment go wherever the water wants to carry it. And again, I'm leaving this in fast motion here so that you can see it all come together. It's a very, very easy process. Just pick a couple of areas inside the leaf to lay down some color, kind of control it a little, and then add water on the outer edges of that leaf and allow the pigment to just flow to the outside. And I love the way this turned out, and I wouldn't have done this. Originally, I was going to do better press, I was going to do blind letterpress, and then foiling with these. And again, since that cleaner kind of destroyed my background, quote unquote destroyed it, I just decided to, what is it? Zig. Zig instead of zag. Whatever the occasion requires, just go with the flow. Okay, so here we're going to do our sentiment. I'm using the Better Press paper. I'm using rose gold foil from Spellbinders, and we're just going to foil this onto our paper. And you'll see here that I get gorgeous transfer of the foil, even though we're working on that Better Press cotton panel. You can see here we've got the texture of the paper, but no overfoiling and really no underfoiling to speak of. So now it's time to die cut this. And again, we're going to use those notched corner frame dies. Now the trick here If you're cutting better press cotton panels, it's a very soft paper. It is meant to take impressions very well. If you have a marked up top plate, you will transfer those marks to the paper. Now, here's the trick that I discovered. You just need to adjust your plate. So for my machine, it's super tight. I'm going to remove that B platform. This is the universal platform system. And I'm going to replace the B with my Glimmer Thin Shim. So you'll see here, I'm going to show you that the Glimmer Thin Shim is just a little bit thinner than that B plate. So I'm going to hold that up for you, and you can see here, it's maybe half the size of that B platform. So I'll swap those out, and then I'll build my sandwich exactly the same. A C cutting plate, I'm going to put my die in there, a top C cutting plate, and you can see here that this cutting plate does have marks on it. But this is going to supply the perfect amount of pressure to cut my die, but not leave any markings on that better press paper. So I mentioned I would show you guys this trick a couple of videos ago. And like I said, this is what works in my machine. You may have to play with your sandwich construction a little bit for your machine, depending on how tight it is, but this works beautifully and perfect for me. So again, for my machine, it was the A base platform, the Glimmer Thin Shim, a C cutting plate, my die and paper, and then another C cutting plate. Okay, so like I mentioned, I was creating on the fly here. I had no plan since my other plan went out the window, and I decided this needed a little something, and I grabbed this burlap. I picked this up at Michael's, and I'm pretty sure they sell this year-round in their seasonal section. I'm going to layer that behind it. So I've trimmed it down, and then I'm going to use some double-sided tape, some strong double-sided tape to hold these together. And I'm lining it up to make sure that it's even with the grain, the weaving of the burlap, making sure that those lines are straight going down the edges there, because I am going to trim this down just a little bit further, and then we're going to pull out some of those vertical fibers there to allow it to have a frayed edge. So you can see here I'm pulling out some of those fibers, letting that edge look a little bit frayed, and then I'm going to trim the top and the corners. Because this is the notched corner frame, I kind of want it to match. It doesn't have to be exact, but just trimming it there at an angle is going to give it the same look. And if you wanted, you could sew this around the edges, but I'm not that talented with my sewing machine, and corners, rounded corners, it would not look cute. But if you're good with the sewing machine, go for it. And I'm going to save those extra fibers off to the side. Now what I can manage with my sewing machine is a hard corner. So I'm going to add some stitching around the edge of this panel. And for that, I'm just using my Singer sewing machine. I'm not a seamstress. I don't even know what model it is. It's probably like a mid-grade, low-grade Singer sewing machine. I think the only time this thing has seen anything but paper is the one time I made a purse. But I do love the detail that stitched edge adds. And you could leave this just like this. It'd be great, but the frame from the Autumn Thanks frame gave me an idea to use the Autumn Wonder dies to recreate that. So I've spared you the pain of watching me die cut, and I've cut all my elements from the Better Press Cotton panel. And I want these to match what we've previously done. So before I matched the watercolor to our Better Press inks, now we're going to color match with our Distress inks. And the best color matches that I found for the Better Press inks with the Distress line, for the Tuscan, the Wild Honey is a really good match. Now for the Coastal, the Uncharted Mariner is pretty good, but it can be very dark. So if you wanted, you can mix the Uncharted Mariner and the speckled egg, or you can just use a very watered down version of the Uncharted Mariner. For these apricot, the Saltwater Taffy is a great match, and then for the clay, Rusty Hinge is a good match. Now to color my die cuts, I'm just going to do some ink smushing. So I put a little bit of ink onto my craft mat here, spray it with water, and then I'm going to take each element and dip it into the color on my mat. Sometimes I'll spray the element down with water first if I want a lighter version of that color, and sometimes I'll just go straight in. It just depends on the look that I'm going for. Remember, wet on wet blends, wet on dry builds. So here I will dry between each layer, and then occasionally I will add more water and make another watery layer, or I'll just go straight into the concentrated ink there and leave those with hard ink spots. Love the way that looks. Now, this is where you can get creative. Do it as little or as much as you want, as light or as dark as you want. I just like the variation. Now, alternately, you could create full background panels of each color and then die cut your pieces from those backgrounds. I happen to like to do it this way because although I'm not a control freak, sometimes I am a little bit of a control freak. There are certain things that I just leave to chance, and then there are other things that I enjoy the process. So something like this, building the color and being a little more decisive in where things go, I kind of like that. That's fun to me. So here you can see I've put down a little bit of rusty hinge. I'm mixing that with that wild honey. And then I've also added a little bit of gathered twigs and added a little bit of brown into this. Now I'm going to use that, the Uncharted Mariner, a little bit of speckled egg. So I've dipped into the speckled egg, got a base color going, and then I'll go over top of that with a little bit of that Uncharted Mariner, and I'll even dip into some of the wild honey. I'm just trying to get a harmonious color palette, and even if I'm adding in the brown and the green, it's okay because I'm creating those new colors with colors that are already existing in my color palette. So it's going to keep it nice and harmonious. For our mushrooms, I'm going to put down a little bit of pumice stone, highly underrated distress color here. I particularly like the oxide. I like the colors that it separates into when you add water to it. Beautiful, beautiful color, perfect for the mushroom stems. Now for the mushroom caps, we're going to use that saltwater taffy. You can see here that it is a little more on the pink than the apricot, but because we have that wild honey, if we wanted to push it a little more corally, we could just add in a little bit of that wild honey. So after I'm finished creating all of my pieces here, it is time to layer up these dies because they are layering dies. And they're really easy to put together. I didn't have any trouble figuring out what went to what. And if you've been here a minute, you know I rarely look at instructions. So if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. I promise. And if for some reason you can't figure it out, check the Spellbinders website. They have great examples on their website. And I'll have all of these supplies that I used listed in the description box below. So if you want to check any of those out, make sure you check there for the links. So for my project today, all I have to do is put together the mushrooms and the berry stems. That's all we're going to use that needs to be built. The rest of them, the leaves and everything, they're just the one layer. All right, and with that finished, we have all of our pieces and parts, and it's just time to build our card. So for that, I'm trimmed that panel down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. I'm going to adhere that with some liquid adhesive to a craft card base, standard A2 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch. And then because we have those stitched edges, it creates a little bit of a raised edge. I'm going to lay a heavy acrylic block on it to help it make contact while it dries, so it'll be securely adhered. For the sentiment panel, I'm going to flip that over and put some foam tape on the back. I want this to be popped up a little bit so that I can tuck some of those elements between the sentiment panel and the base panel there. So that'll allow me to tuck some elements behind there and create some dimension. Now for my arrangement, again, I'm going to leave in the arrangement process. I'm going to try to talk you through it. Hopefully it's not too painful. I'm going to try to remember what I was thinking while I was arranging. But then I'm going to just adhere it all off camera. I'll use my regular press and seal trick. I've showed you guys that a million times. So there's really no need to show that one again. All right, so first thing I want to do is decide how do I want this? Do I want one single focal point and then everything to support that? Do I want a symmetrical mirrored arrangement, or do I want a completely balanced frame all the way around? Remember my inspiration piece was the Autumn Thanks frame die. That illustration has a balanced frame going all the way around the sentiment created from these autumnal elements. But what I'm zeroing in on over here is a central focal point in the bottom right hand corner. So I'm going to use the leaves. All the leaves are just going to support those mushrooms. It's the one thing that is, there's It's the one thing that's different. Okay, so everything else has been repeated with the leaves in the background, the leaves in the foreground, the leaves on the left, on the right. The mushrooms are the one thing that's different, so they're automatically going to become a focal point. So I've grouped them together on the lower right-hand side, and everything else is just going to support that. I'm going to use the leaves to create a little bit of balance in the way of color. So I've pulled some yellow on the left, the right going up the left side. I've added some green leaves and some red berries to the right side, so I'm going to balance that by adding the green leaves and the berries to the left side as well. Now, if here I'm not loving this, that left side is going up higher than the right side, and I want the left side to be lower than the right side. Again, I want the right side to be the focal point. So what I'm going to do is take that green leaf and I'm going to tear it. I'm going to make it smaller and I'm going to fit it into our arrangement so that it is lower than the green leaves on the right side. So don't be afraid to do that. You can alter your die cuts, especially these type. If you don't need the whole thing, then don't try to force all that extra die cut into your arrangement. Just make it shorter and tuck it in there. All right, so this is where I ended up. You can see I removed one of those leaves on the left side so that my right side was up higher, and I added some buttons in here. Now, remember I told you those fibers that I pulled out of the burlap? This is where we're going to add those back in. I'm going to group them into a bunch. I'm going to add some glue behind these elements, and then I'm going to use my tweezers to just stuff those fibers into the glue, and I'm going to hold it in place until the glue grabs hold of it and it dries. This is a fun way to add some texture. You could do this with moss, you could do it with the fibers, cheesecloth. You could also add, like a Easter card. You could tuck some of that paper Easter grass in here. Heck, you could make your own Easter grass. If you've got a paper crimper, and some thin cardstock, just cut it into strips, run it through the paper crimper. Stick it up in your arrangements like this. Just tuck it in there, stick it in wherever you can get it to fit. And the metallic threads look really pretty, especially on Christmas cards where you have floral arrangements. Just wad it up like this, take your tweezers and just tuck it into areas, add some adhesive, and you're good to go. All right, so this is pretty much it. Let's take a look at the two finished cards. So this is the one that we just finished. You can see here as some final touches, I added a little bit of distressing to that front focal panel. And I knew from the beginning that I was going to do this, which is why I used the Better Press paper, even though we were doing foiling. Here you can see that background, absolutely gorgeous. You still have that physical dimension from the letterpress, but you've got that beautiful color from those new Desert Sunset inks. Absolutely beautiful. That rose gold foiling just adds a little bit of shine. We've got all this interest and dimension in our die cuts, the buttons, the burlap that we repeated by using those discarded threads and tucking them into our arrangement. I love the way this turned out, and I think it turned out way better than my original idea. So I was actually happy that I had that whoopsie on the original panel. Speaking of the original panel, here's the second card. Here I swapped up our arrangement. So instead of having the focal point on the right, I put it on the left this time, and I left a little gap in between the two, made the arrangement much heavier and taller on the left side, and then a littler arrangement on the right. Now I added thread this time instead of the burlap fibers, but here in the background, this is the one that the cleaner spilled onto. And you can see here at the bottom, there's a lot of that ink missing. That's where the cleaner actually ate away the ink. It basically cleaned it. All right, so those are the finished projects for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, if you're looking for any of the featured supplies, make sure to check the description box below. I'll have links there for everything. I want to thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. That way I know that you enjoy these process videos. While you're at it, make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss my next video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.